The following podcast is sponsored by Basico. At Basico, we understand your needs and pain points. Our expertise in CFO services, legal, finance IT, and people and payroll helps drive your business forward by inspiring change and challenging norms. We believe in deep explorative discussions and critical angles, the same spirit that fuels the Only Constant podcast hosted by our own Lasse Rindom. Discover more about Basico's vision and services at basico.dk. And if you like what you hear in this episode, please don't hesitate to share it with a friend. And now Lasse, take it away.
You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Serge Belongie, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi Serge, and welcome to The Only Constant. I'm thrilled to have you with me today, especially as you're also you're exposed in so many ways right now as Denmark as the chair for the European Union, and you are also on the board of ELIS and part of the Europe's conference as well. So I'm just really happy that you took the time to join me today.
Great, thanks for inviting me.
So I remember when we spoke in our prep chat that you really liked history as well. So I actually just thought today, I don't know if there's anything to this thought, but I just thought anyway that back when you always have these different classes sort of dominating when new stuff emerged. When the bourgeoisie emerged, you had the nobility sort of still dominating, but then slowly succumbing or being displaced by the nobility, and no by the bourgeoisie, right? And what I'm thinking about here is really what is in an AI world or AI, everything is exploding now. What is the nobility here? What is the old order? And what is the bourgeoisie? And should we expect things to be replaced immediately?
Wow, it's a very interesting question. I don't know that I could trace that back millennia necessarily, because I think what we're experiencing with AI is more of a continuation of themes around automation in society. So these would be things like the printing press, industrial processes. So any type of thing that was consistently done with manual labor, with human workforces, that gets transformed into an automated assembly line or something like that. That gave rise to a lot of what we see in the world. Of course, that famously happened with the auto industry. I already mentioned printing press. So I don't know that I can square that with the classes that you're talking about, because those are as old as time. So I identify what's going on with AI more as a continuation of the march of automation.
Yeah, but that march has also been sort of hallmarked by different convergence points where things change. Where the old landowners were were displaced by bourgeoisie. Instead, it's more interesting to sell the products than produce the products.
Yeah.
So you see, things have happened in that. In that transformation as well. So I get your point. We're in the same modus, right? We're doing the same thing as automation. But I'm just thinking, are we? So is there a before IT and then an after IT with AI? Right? Does that make sense?
It's a good question. I mean, the kind of thing that comes to mind, again, anchoring off of the printing press. If you think about how valuable books were at that time, I mean, books were transcribed by monks, and an individual book cost the equivalent of a house. And if you had access to them, they were probably chained to a post inside a secure facility. So getting access to that kind of information was very, very difficult. You had to be privileged or have a very good reason. And so I think that obviously things got significantly democratized at that point in good and bad ways. So it's probably the case that only the nobility had access to those types of books and the education that went with them. And then that got democratized. So we're certainly seeing something like that, but it's hard to square this kind of disruption with anything that came before because of the different classes within the workforce that are being disrupted. The kinds of professions such as paralegal, bookkeeping, things like that, a lot of knowledge work. It isn't just a matter of having access to the documentation in an easy and accessible way. It's that these AI systems are able to answer rudimentary or beyond type questions. So I think the jury's still out on what historical...
we've translated everything into information work, right? And knowledge work has been what we've done with the previous automation. We sort of ended there, and now we're sort of disrupting.
Right. And then if you look at it, ancient jobs, the equivalent of plumbing, agriculture, well, not agriculture, but let's take plumbing as an example. AI is not coming for plumbing. I mean, we hear about robotics and AI, that there's a lot of excitement on the horizon for that. But for the most part, the AI we're seeing is a brain in the box. So there's a lot of manual labor type jobs that are perhaps surprisingly incredibly safe. So that turns some narratives on its head.
Yeah, that is actually maybe a divergence from the modus, where it's always been about, making manual labor easier. It's farming has gone from being 60% of what the workforce to being like 3%, I don't know, nothing almost, right? To produce all the food we need. But now we're actually seeing a change that these roles are not being displaced by the new technology wave. That's actually an interesting perspective. And on your books thing, I think I remember the Great Library of Alexandria, right? The Great Library had something like 200 books or something. So I just want to sort of emphasize that it's not really that great. Define great. I'm also a very great person then. In that. I think I've had 200 great thoughts in my life. But Serge, the whole world right now is obviously preoccupied with AI. Is this a good or a bad thing, do you think?
Well, I think we can talk about history again in that context, because I think that, to make a very gross caricature, the media by construction forgets history. So it forgets what even happened 6 months ago. So there can be hyperbolic waves of hype, and then it's as if it never happened. There's no accountability whatsoever for the outrageous claims that various people make. And so I think this has been the case for probably the invention of the transistor, for the creation of the internet, for the mobile web, for, to some extent, blockchain, cryptocurrency. So there are these waves that happen. And I think we could point to the emergence of Google around 2000 or so as a tectonic event that occurred that it may sound...
Tectonic, that's nice. Well done. Well played.
Unintentional. But I think anyone who was an elementary school or high school teacher remembers very well around 2000 or 2001 when pretty much any student anywhere could just type in a homework problem or an essay topic and just get basically the answer. And doesn't that sound familiar? I mean, of course, in the case of ChatGPT or Claude, it takes it a step further. But all of and this is also true for university instructors, decades of problem sets were designed under the assumption that it would be hard to get access to those solution sets or variants of those exams. And suddenly, famously, the way that Google did it with just that simple field, it just said, I'm feeling lucky, and then it had a couple buttons. So this is between 98 and 2000 or so. So think about the shockwaves that sent through all these different classrooms, and also in the legal profession and other places where that even knowledge that was technically in the public domain, it doesn't mean it was easy to get. And so that march began. Google did that with general information. Then they did it with maps. Then they did it with patent searches and all these things. So I think we've seen that type of thing. And then in my case as a professor, I'm maybe most emotionally linked to that phenomenon of assessments and exercises and exams and so forth. It all had to be redone. We had to rethink how we approach education. And so I think
Wikipedia is also a thing,
Wikipedia
right? Yeah.
was another one. And you remember the kind of snobbery that emerged around that, because at the time,
that's not real knowledge.
As I recall,
no sources.
Encyclopedia Britannica was the king, but you always knew that any teacher would tell their students, you must cite primary sources. Well, not Wikipedia at all. That hadn't even existed, but you can't simply cite an encyclopedia. You have to go to primary sources. That feels quaint now. Because it's more like if someone simply uses an LLM to get their answer, any teacher will say that's not okay. It might even be considered cheating. But rather than asking for a primary source, they might say at least show Wikipedia, right? So that this is kind of a moving window we're observing.
Yeah, true. So, but that's so. I completely buy into that we've seen something like this before, and this transformation. Also, people talk about bubbles, and the .com bubble is an obvious also comparison where you say, well, the things we achieved from the .com bubble were not lost afterwards. So maybe the investment went away, or you lost some money, but the technology sort of lived on and found a new way. And we had to actually invent the internet. It was not just a grab and dump on the internet thing like the .com wave, right? So maybe something like that as well. But I think the whole way that we're right now, approaching AI, and also know that you don't necessarily, the whole LLM craze. Yeah. Do you think is this a good or bad thing? So I want to get into a little bit more about, do you think the focus on LLMs purely is a good thing right now? Or, in Denmark, we say, 30,000 public jobs can be replaced by AI. And are we, what's the good and the bad thing here? For your career, it must obviously be, I don't know, a good thing.
Right.
Maybe, I don't know. I'm just asking you.
Yeah, I think, as you described, the previous waves of hype and the bubbles and investment, one thing that's consistent throughout that is what I call the idiot wind. So there's this idiot wind that blows through a lot of discourse throughout human history. It's not the only wind. There's also winds of genius and things like that. But there are things like unsubstantiated hype and utter nonsense and, grifting and, con men are always present. There's nothing new about that, but there's always some kind of signal in there. Although in the case of cryptocurrency, I still can't quite get my hands on it, but most of these huge waves of hype, there's a core of something there. And it's a matter of waiting for that dust to settle. So there can be huge predictions that simply don't come true. And if you then are overwhelmed with cynicism and say, oh, this whole web search thing is nonsense, or the privacy issues with maps are insurmountable or whatever, and you just shut the door on it, well, that's a loss for humanity. So there's a certain amount, I would say, of unavoidable sparring and kind of ugly conflict that occurs about hype and reality and the haves and the have-nots. But you can see throughout the timeline of the last 200 years or so that things do settle and they become what is now called ordinary technology. But as an investing strategy, or if you're trying to raise massive amounts of investment, the last thing you want to do is call what you're doing ordinary technology. But there was a time when VisiCalc or Excel, spreadsheets, that was sensational technology. Yeah. That was displacing hundreds of thousands of people from the workforce, democratizing bookkeeping. You didn't have to hire programmers. That was disruptive. Fast forward 10 years, it's ordinary technology.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole change management thing about it in the 90s, how do we make people work with Excel? And now how do we make people work with AI? It's sort of in the same...
And these poor employees are just getting it pushed on them. Just everywhere they click, AI pops up. And
so I see one thing you said, it's the friction thing there. When we start, touching, there's the conflict of... that I usually call friction between the reality and the technology to some extent, right? There's a friction there. But hype, how you should say, is frictionless. It moves at speed. And as soon as you're starting to say, okay, now we know ChatGPT, it doesn't work on my process, then you invent a new word, AGI or agents or ASI. ASI, AGI sold, last year. Let's talk about ASI, right?
Yeah.
So we keep on moving with new words because new words sell or wins more investments, right? Yeah. So are we? The obvious question here is this a bubble? Are we going to get to agent frameworks? And is that going to work based solely on LLMs? Or?
Yeah, so I don't think it's a bubble because I think there's so much substance to it. There's still enormous amounts of bullshit. I mean, but that is not new. That part is absolutely par for the course. Although it's, I would say it's probably an order of magnitude bigger than the last few rounds of this. But
the last few rounds, that is actually my fear. I feel the last few rounds maybe are too much.
I see what you mean. Well, first let's talk about the LLM piece because as I hinted before in terms of how the media covers this type of thing with zero accountability, the goals keep shifting, the terminology keeps shifting. There's no one's being held accountable. And people spew nonsense and fake having expertise in areas where they don't. But one of the things that has very clearly shifted is it's not about LLMs anymore. So the LLMs, very specifically the next token prediction, that dazzling effect that people experienced a few years ago when they typed in a prompt and immediately saw these tokens popping out. Just there was no thinking, there was no RAG, retrieval
like a Palantir moment, you had this magic ball and then
you just type this in and the tokens start popping out, and that absolutely dazzled people. And I liken that to the shift from Yahoo, which was circa 1995, to the very simple Google search circa 1998. The incredible simplicity that they chose to go from something that looked like a Yellow Pages cluttered interface to something that was almost all a plain white screen with a single field that you just typed in and you just got. I know this sounds crazy circa 2025, but you Googled and you got fantastic responses. Usually you could hit the I'm feeling lucky button and it would be correct.
And you would be lucky, yeah.
So the LLMs dazzled people, but it didn't take long for people to realize how much they were confabulating and just flat out getting things wrong. And then came a lot of nonsense claims that it was just a matter of scale. Yeah. You simply need more GPUs, more weights, and so forth. But what was happening in the background was the creation, you mentioned it already, the so-called agents, which I like to call software, because it was very intoxicating to think that you could just make one LLM to rule them all. It would learn all programming languages, all human languages, all of physics, all of law, etc., and it would just figure it out. And it's very clear that that has not happened, and I would say that it will not happen in any form of LLM. But when you surround the LLM with so-called tools, and the tools can be web search, they can be a variety of agents, but again, this is software. Not in a bad way. It's just good old-fashioned software engineering. Scaffolding. These are safeguards, sanity checks, and it's popular to call them agents because you can think of them as different compliance checkers or alignment.
The word agent is so confusing for a lot of people because it's getting called everything. I also think that, one of the first things I everyone started calling it stochastic parrots, and I think Stephen Pemberton was also in the second guest on the podcast. He said they're stochastic parrots, right? Yeah. And then I thought, stochasticism. So what do we do about that typically? Well, we add numbers. Yeah. We just don't ask one LLM. You have to have one LLM and then another to check that. Yeah. So you sort of you add numbers because that's how you even a stochastic process.
Yeah, right. But then that's sort of like a million monkeys at the keyboards kind of thing, to mix metaphors. But there's only so much you can do. Again, LLMs are remarkable in terms of capturing a very human-like sense of fluency. It's kind of remarkable. I mean, it's not an accident that people had that aha moment when using ChatGPT for the first time. But
it's like asking a Palantir, right?
Yeah.
You get an answer in a bowl.
It's very important to separate the notion of fluency, that facility with human language. You have to separate that from competence and knowledge, depth of insight. These are very different things, but at the same time, it's a reminder how susceptible the general public is to the appearance of what would you say? Appearance of being knowledgeable, appearance of
it's just usually the value, right? We're used to saying, I see this, and then if I'm able to describe it, I get rich or something. I get a good job because I'm able to describe it in detail, right? But the thing is that I have this, and I spoke about this in an episode not yet out yet with Elon Hauge, that I have a physical world. I see things, and then I have a knowledge world as well, so something I can express in words or understand. And those are both limited. But the AI is just completely unlimited in the knowledge or the fluency of words, but very limited in its ability to understand the actual world, right? Yeah. And maybe that's what we're used to. We communicate. It's a hack on language. Yeah. And then a hack on society, civilization, right? To some extent, because civilization, you and me now. Yeah. This is language, right? Yeah. We're not even touching anything. We're not sitting here with an actual GPU or LLM. We're just talking about it, and this could also be AI. All right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the fluency is something, and I think one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about with these LLMs is it seems like the compressed version of knowledge is almost like having and I'm still figuring out what I actually think about this. So that's why I don't dare to ask it anyway. I'd say it is the whole Platonic idea of the world of ideas, that is sort of, they always answer based on the common bias. Yeah, this is how a cat would usually be a cat. Yeah, and that's not all the representations of cat. Right. So is this, when we talk about it as a Palantir, is this touching a Palantir directly into the world of ideas? Do you get my point?
I think you might be giving too much credit to what exists in terms of the LLM infrastructure that's out there. I don't think it can be overemphasized that what is there is not particularly well curated. So unwelcome bias is not the exception, it's the rule. So these things, in the same way that Google crawled the internet and built all of its indices, the same thing happened with the Common Crawl and all of the related efforts to get all of the tokens necessary pulled in to train these massive models. So I'm very hesitant to use the word knowledge. We certainly have a massive amount of data.
Just instead of saying knowledge, say bias. So the models have tons of biases. Yeah. And what I said with the Platonic, the world of ideas and the world of representations. Yeah. Then they have the ideas that's bias, isn't it?
Yeah, but bias is everywhere. So it would only be a question of cultural alignment that would make it good or bad. Yeah. Yeah. So what did you crawl? What were the references? Was it the Royal Library of Denmark? Was it 4chan?
What if you just scale it then? I think that the magic, and it's just, me thinking the Platonic thing, and then I was like, there's something weird here. I actually asked myself, what would Plato say if he met these models? Yeah. Would he be like, yeah, this is, whoa.
Well, it's a good distinction. I mean, you could put Platonic models on one side. So let's line up Plato, Wittgenstein, and Roche. So these are three different views about categories and prototypes. Plato said we can look at things in terms of Venn diagrams or attributes. So if you were looking for, say, a bird on Wikipedia or something, you could describe it in terms of presence or absence of attributes. So like an ostrich has a long neck. And if you answer that question, you look at it in terms of a Venn diagram, you're in or out. Like if you say it's a long neck, you now go down this path. And so that kind of Platonic system was dominant for a long time, not just for visual categories, but just understanding things in the world. And Wittgenstein disrupted this. His famous example was Russian roulette. Is it a game? Right? So if you look at a Venn diagram type description of things that involve games, it usually doesn't involve murder or suicide. So that kind of thing led to the Roche prototype type theory, which was that we think of things in terms of archetypes or they're often called prototypes today, but it was really archetypes, that there is some kind of, like what we would call a Platonic bird, is not characterized by this convenient binary list of presence and absence, but it would rather be an instance itself. And that so that Platonic bird would probably not be an ostrich or a penguin, but it would be a sparrow, for example. And that's the kind of thing I alluded to, these cultural phenomena earlier, that depends on where you go. If you want a Platonic ideal of a breakfast, Platonic ideal of a doctor, whatever those things are, it is very much, it's true. It's what you said. It's bias. You conjure up an image of a doctor. You're going to get a different rendering, a different visualization, depending on which culture you tap into. So there's only instances. That's what you're saying. Yeah. So that's really what Roche said, was just there are instances that are special, and then there's a notion of distance from it. And whether you're considered weird or normal depends on those distances.
And I think it's very important to be aware of that as well, especially when we're working with these AI models as well. I think also that was Thomas Hildebrandt's only constant on the show, that there's no system without bias. Even if it looks like that, it is biased. Yeah. Remember, you know?
Yeah. That's why I'm hesitant to use the word, because it's like if someone in the US says, "Oh, I don't have an accent when I speak English." Oh, but you do. You just don't know it.
But that's also non-falsifiable, right? Yeah. Because then suddenly you will always have, you don't have a mother problem, but you do. You just haven't found it yet. So, and I also don't like that, but that's another discussion. Yeah. Let's not do that right now. I'm actually happy you said in a moment ago, five minutes ago, you said these very human-like. You said, and that wasn't you. You said that, because I know you hate that.
Yeah. No, I don't.
But you said, there's a lot of things to say. This is the same as with humans when we talk about AI. And why is that wrong? I just remember when we had a chat a couple of months ago where you were like, I don't like anthropomorphizing.
Yeah, I remember, and you're like, I see you did that.
Yeah, right now I'm like, you did that. I'm pointing at you. Yes, you just did it.
Yeah.
I accuse.
Yeah. No, but I didn't. This is our second chance to do that. I didn't actually know what you meant, because it seemed like a gotcha moment that flew over my head. So let's try it again.
No, but my point is, why is it wrong to anthropomorphize? Is it wrong?
Okay. So one way to frame the question is, does any good come from conscious anthropomorphization of public-facing AI products? And to make it more concrete, we could say companies like OpenAI trade in the value of human-like deception. Okay, I don't even want to put it in a bad way, but they benefit to the extent that the average user feels that they're having a conversation with a conscious being, they benefit. That is a choice, because they could tune the model so that at every moment of interaction, you know you're dealing with a bot, right? And if it's a speech interface, it could be a conscious decision to make it sound like a robot from the 60s. If it's in the context of typed text, it could be a typeface that looks like green dot matrix. There are absolutely things we could do in an ambient way that remind you you're not talking to a person.
Yeah, in the spring they said, sorry, the model got too sycophantic. And everyone was like, okay, so weird, you just tuned that up. Then they toned it down, but then they reintroduced it with GPT-5. It's super sycophantic now.
Yeah.
Because it's consumption.
Exactly. And so I think as an academic, I'm not focused on product market fit. But I suspect it's a very conscious decision to play into the illusion, because then you get more engagement. I think in terms of social responsibility, the more that you're able to remind users that it's not a conscious being, the better. But that's why I'm not Sam Altman. I mean, it's a conscious decision. So we have to ask, does anything good come from ascribing anthropomorphic qualities to these systems? That's a new question. Is it good to take actions specifically because it leads to more engagement? So if we think that it's good that unprecedented numbers of young people are using these systems for companionship and therapy, I happen not to think that's good. But if you think that's good, then you want to anthropomorphize the systems as much as possible. If you are advancing the use of AI in the public sector, and you have people that are coding up systems for traffic light synchronization, public transit system, logistics, and so forth, and these systems become sycophantic and tell them that poorly written code is actually a good thing and that they're a genius for suggesting this library that doesn't exist, that's horrific. I would say that person is not benefiting from these systems kissing their ass in that way, and that it would actually be better if the systems accurately represented themselves as a kind of stochastic parent.
I completely agree. I always, when I'm doing presentations or in smaller groups, I always make tests to show people that, these are machines.
Yeah.
And one of the ways I do that is by taking it up, putting it on voice mode and saying, so what do you want to talk about? And then it's like, I don't know, what do you want to talk about? And no, what do you want to talk about? I'm just here to chill with you and talk about whatever. And it keeps on going, because it's not in the room. It doesn't know.
Exactly.
And then the second thing is giving it a poem and say, what do you think about it? Oh, great poem. And then I say, be harsh. Oh, crappy poem.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, do you realize what just happened?
You see, what you're doing as a savvy user is staging a situation that helps people connect with the risks.
Yeah.
So you have to take that action.
Yeah.
That's a responsible action on your part.
That's not something the software does. That's not something ChatGPT does.
And of course, from a product standpoint, it would be silly to introduce that friction because you want to pursue that illusion. And I don't begrudge them that. I think that is another one of the historical constants. I mean, that of course you want, even when AI was clunky, think about talking cars in the 80s, or there was a wave of toys and machines that talked, and we got rid of that, right?
Where do you want to go, Michael? Or something
right.
Like
Knight Rider, yeah. So I think that there is that inclination in startups and industry and so forth to go in that direction. But I really think we need a push and a pull on that, because it is.
Lauren Pratt said that AI is the only business technology that has its own Hollywood genre. I think that's one of the most quoted quotes I've quoted.
Its own what?
It's the only business technology that has its own Hollywood genre.
Oh yeah,
It's not like you have ERP movies, right?
Right.
You have AI movies, So I think that also influences it, and that this future and these dreams of old men and Mustafa Salim or whatever, the things, the worlds they see, all of them, right?
Yeah.
Not to quote a book, but the point is, they all see things in the future, and I think that actually at some point, in the next couple of years, what we will see is models where we will be told that these are systems trying to suggest things.
Yeah.
I think that this is part of the bubble. I think it's part of the overhype and overpromise of these things, or I hope it is.
Yeah.
I really hope it is. Because I think it's very important to know that a system is a system, and you are responsible for whatever it does, right?
Yeah, I think, the saying that...
The evaluation is on you.
Yes, the saying sunlight is the best disinfectant. I think just the fact that more people are using these systems is probably more effective than any amount of nerdy professors getting on TED Talk stages and trying to tell them that these systems are not super intelligent. If you are an admin assistant at any company, sort of a knowledge economy type company, and you're getting AI products pushed on you, and you actually try to use it for something, and it creates AI slop, and you end up working twice as long to get it ready, or you're in such a hurry that you push it down the pipeline and someone gets that AI slop, that's a visceral experience. That's something where you say, wow, this has been oversold. And I think people just need to experience it themselves.
I think my kids actually, maybe my kids are smart. I don't know. I'm not going to comment on that. They are. If they listen in, they're definitely smart.
Yeah.
But I'm proud of them. But but the point is that I think that they're actually very critical of these things. Like they're critical. They don't use the Snapchat AI thing. They don't. Their consumption of social media is also something they switch on and off when they want to do it. They have they're grown up with this.
Right. They're natives.
They're natives. Yeah. And I'm actually sometimes much more worried about the elder gen. Yeah, the boomers and even though they're almost leaving the market as well now. But those that we call the boomers, because they're not used to this, and they're like,
absolutely.
whoa, this is crazy. And democracy is going to get, the fake news and fake images, and they just fall for it, right?
Yeah.
And they have a vote still. They're still there in the market.
Absolutely.
Where my kids are like, yeah, I know this is a machine.
Yep.
When they talk about LLMs, they're like, they're not even remotely thinking about going in and having an LLM boyfriend, girlfriend, right?
That's
they're
right.
like, no. This is a machine. It's just, it's cool technology, but I sort of expect that of the world. That's how they approach it.
Yeah.
Right? So you said kids before, right? The kids having boyfriend. Is it really? Is that really the problem?
Well, I think this is a case of what's sometimes called pointing at the moon, and people are looking at your finger. There are enduring massive problems that society has faced in terms of people feeling alienated, bullied, excluded, not having a supportive home environment. I mean, these are very classic problems, and it doesn't take much Googling or ChatGPTing to find all of the historical precedents for what people are blaming for causing the problem. And I mean, it sounds absurd, but people could blame the proliferation of newspapers, paperback books, or more recently things like Usenet groups on the internet or whatever these things are. If you have kids that are feeling alienated and parents that are perhaps overworked or checked out, or all these are not new problems, but there's this increased pressure with every technology wave. There are more and more tempting, toxic distractions that feed into the same vulnerabilities. So yes, of course, we need to keep our eye on the latest technology that is grabbing vulnerable kids' attentions. And as you say, the kids that are thriving, well-adjusted, have a balanced diet of media and education and so forth, they can look at it with disdain and say, oh, that's so obviously fake. What if a kid is in a home with substance abuse, or they're feeling, all those things, those vulnerabilities are not new. And the same grifters exist. Like, it's a tribe that persists throughout history. They will always be there to prey on the vulnerable.
But almost saying like that if you get, if you become an alcoholic or you become a drug addict, it's because you wanted to become one, or something in you needed it. Is that the same?
Well, I think of it in terms of affordances. So if someone, if circumstances are such that someone's vulnerable and it's exacerbated by usual suspects like wealth inequality, broken home, perhaps they're marginalized because of their sexual identity or whatever those things are. These are cocktails that are very familiar. And so it creates an affordance or a vulnerability. And then whatever those addictive substances are, or whatever those bad things are, that changes throughout time. And the toxicity, of course, can vary. And I think any healthy society is dealing both with the symptoms and the disease.
I wanted to ask you about, because I know you've studied a lot about these, the AI senses or AI, upticks and how it interacts with the world. And that's been part of your research studies as well. So I wanted to ask you, how does AI sense the world? But maybe the real question is to say, how does AI and humans sense each other? And maybe that's also what we're touching upon here, that there's something AI doesn't sense. Or you talked about the sycophants with LLMs and the biases. But then the human is an endpoint in this suddenly as well, right?
So I touched on it earlier when I was referring to current AI technology as brain in a jar. So I think, and my own background in computer vision and image recognition still technically fits that, in the sense that you can put a camera in that jar and it's still looking at the world. And it is pretty dazzling how far you can get with a brain in the jar, with a keyboard interface and an increased sensing in terms of audio and visual. The categorical thing that's missing here is what's called embodiment. And embodiment is hard because it involves physical sensors, actuation, robotics, and so forth, combined with AI, and the ability to respond with two or more people or agents interactively. I mean, these are all the Wild West. So right now we're pretty advanced in terms of brain in a jar type AI. But the embodied examples where the AI is experiencing things in real time, and you may not have 100 million examples in a training set with benchmarks and so forth for the tasks that you're trying to address. That's still a Wild West. And we're starting to see some glimmers of that because augmented reality and AI are starting to come together. But these aren't, they don't have widespread adoption at this point. It's still pretty much people on devices prompting, interacting with the systems and so forth. So the age of embodied AI, it hasn't come yet, but it will.
But it's also that's gonna be slow, isn't it? Hopefully, because I think I saw, obviously everyone's seen some horrific videos. But one of the things that actually scared me was, an LLM with tool access to a machine gun, and the vision, and then you were like, no, and it was just shooting at things, right? It actually found it and shot at it. But how do we guardrail that? And how do we control? I think people who want to push this out, right? The Optimus bots and all that as well, right?
I think those fears are misplaced in the sense that right now there are a lot of things that are lumped in as AI that are not. In the same way that when the internet got big, a lot of things were called web technologies and they weren't. It turns out that a whole bunch of challenges that involve AI impacting the public are actually much more old-fashioned challenges like authentication, cybersecurity. Never mind machine guns. Let's just say that you want your system to log in to a utility website and grab your bill. It turns out that is insanely difficult. Not because of LLMs or agentic framework limitations on the intelligence side. It's a matter of websites with bot blocking, authentication systems that don't interoperate, two-factor authentication. This is old stuff. These are things, and you can try to spin up some headless box like a Selenium system that does a lot. Maybe you can get it to work once, but these systems are all very trigger happy to turn on whatever the next level of authentication is. So if you have these really rude, like let's say as a parent, you probably use Aula, you just wanted to use some chatbot.
That's the parent school interface in Denmark. Aula,
right. So that obviously in principle is designed for the average parent to be able to log in and access the information they want. That does not sound like rocket science from an AI perspective. And it isn't. The challenges have to do with system interoperability. So there is a very clear and blunt solution to that problem, which is everyone goes under one umbrella. For example, if OpenAI, if there's a winner-take-all situation where OpenAI simply has one authentication to rule them all, then you're in the walled garden and there is no more issue of authentication interoperability. Right? That would just steamroll over that issue.
I might have an agent that's my digital twin or something like that.
Exactly.
Basically.
But as strange as it sounds, I'm a fan of institutional friction if it is implemented in a way that is protecting society in some way.
But, that's not strange. I've said it. Yeah. I've actually said this on the podcast before, that sometimes slow is a design. Sometimes we make, the EU political establishments, they're all made slow for a reason, so no one can take it over. Yeah. But if you make, one big, super highway, then, and you say, dear OpenAI, now you own my entire identity, do whatever.
Right. But I would again say I don't begrudge them for wanting that.
No.
At most US-based sites, if you go to their main page, you see at least 3 authentication options. Google, Microsoft, some kind of third party, whatever.
Apple.
Apple. And it just says, with the promise of frictionless access, you can just click on that and then you're in that system, right? And it is at great cost to you that is not immediately apparent. These are forms of single sign-on.
Yeah, that's true.
That obviously hugely benefit those companies. At the state level, things like MitID in Denmark and a number of other countries have that. They have a form of single sign-on that I would argue is societally beneficial. So in terms of the software architecture, it's not so different than a Google single sign-on. But I think that it's a question of why you're doing it. Are you doing it to maximize value for shareholders?
Yes.
Or are you doing it to reduce friction for actions in the public sector?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And that's also where you start taking digital infrastructure as critical societal infrastructure as well. And I think that's super important that we start having that discussion as well, right? I think it's been not taken seriously enough in a lot of countries.
Yeah.
They have ChatGPT now, but they don't even have necessarily a digital identity like you said, MitID or NemID that we used to have in Denmark. But also, you just made me think about this whole. I never thought about that, but obviously the sign in with Google and then, just add a Google Gemini agent to that. And then where am I in the equation?
Yeah. And at what point did you click?
I don't know if I just got paranoid here. But
no, but there's a point where you probably click without reading it in great detail, some permission form.
Yeah.
And that you can start to see the slippery slope to the autonomous machine gun.
By accepting this, you allow Google to take action on your behalf. Oh, let's just imagine that, right?
Yeah.
And just there. And
so I don't think that is a good outcome.
No.
But the fact is, these companies are in an all-out war with one another to get your single authentication.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's a form of healthy competition.
In a war, because that means no one's winning.
Right. But as a result, it means that this friction exists everywhere. And so you see these very clunky solutions. You're in the OpenAI ecosystem, but you want access to your Google Docs. So then you think, oh, well, maybe I'm going to jump over to Gemini, right? But then OpenAI says, oh, we don't want you to do that. So we're going to add a bunch of agents that will link to your Google, right? So then Google starts to see all these OpenAI users that are authenticating, and then they have to up their game, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it moves like that all the time. And Apple is just trying to keep people away from that.
Yeah.
So,
and I also want to remind you, in terms of autonomous weapons, like a landmine is an autonomous weapon. And in some sense, it has sensing. You could call it AI, but let's just try to distill these situations. Like the idea of some kind of device that can maim people without any human triggering, without the opposing party triggering. That is not a new thing.
No.
But the bullshit that surrounds it in terms of the sentient AI and the sort of Skynet type stuff, that's new. That's a whole new.
Yeah, and also the whole, the LLM hallucinations attached to machines.
Yeah.
I'm just, because there's just some sort of, there's some sort of, not transparency. I want to say, we can sort of see how. You can sort of see the outcomes of or the confidence intervals, right? When you do it with other systems, but with LLMs, you just don't know why did they make up this decision to shoot at this baby. I'm just crazy situation. We don't really know, right?
There's no. So usually in machine learning, I mean, I don't really like using the term AI, but that ship sailed a long time ago. But within machine learning, it's a must that
there's a Hollywood genre for it. That's why.
Yeah. you quantify uncertainty, and that can be error bars. It can be confidence intervals. And that type of thing is just considered very square and nerdy now to talk about. And again, it would create friction in the product experience that you type your question and it starts overloading you with this notion of uncertainty. Well, that means that consumer is going to abandon that chatbot and go to the one that doesn't do that.
Yeah, true. I want to ask you about data and in AI. Is that ever unambiguous? We talked about bias already, right? Yeah. But I think that a lot of people have been speaking about how if we add context windows, add more data, then we will get even better AI. We also spoke a little bit about that. But is data really the real limit of some sort of AGI or ASI or an unlimited brain? Because I always think data is always. We, as a historian, I'm an educated historian. We spoke about that. We have unlimited data, a lot of data, but every generation have their own stories as well. So I think data is never unambiguous. The larger context windows is not necessarily just making it better; it's just making it more political.
Yeah, I guess you could argue that the access to the data isn't everything, but it is as important to the AI systems as it is to people, whether it's an amateur or an expert. Having the people with the more data are going to do better at attacking any problem. But there is still a very important missing piece between today and whatever it will take to get to AGI. I don't know what it is. Nobody knows what it is. It is not just scale.
No, but I'm always thinking that it's because the world... the world does not just exist, losslessly out there. There is always a loss. There's always something that cannot be grasped. The future, this weird. We're in the middle of past and future, and these models are very much in what's happened in the past. Yeah. But the emerging future all the time is always the limit. That's also my point, right? To some extent, that it has to make a choice.
Yeah, well, this relates to what we were talking about before with embodied AI. So the distinction there, it's what has existed before I call dataset AI. And dataset AI is a decades-long tradition. It's the so-called common task framework. If you want to know how well your system is working, you've entered a competition, you want to show off to your investors, to your readers of your paper, whatever, that you're doing well, you've got to do it on a common test framework. You need benchmark data sets. So these get published, and they can be question answering for customer service. They can be bird identification. They get published. They're quite useful for the first year or so, and then they get saturated to all hell. And but they're still used well beyond their shelf life. And this is the dataset AI era. And it was enormously helpful to get us to where we are, but it has all the problems that you just described. It's always looking to the past.
Yeah.
If you want to look to the future, you want to do nowcasting or forecasting, you're in a tricky situation because you don't have the ability to interact and immediately have the AI respond to it. You can, it will respond to it, but only based on what it's seen in the past. So, but this is a chicken and egg problem because we don't have embodied AI systems.
I called that in that episode with Carl Friston. I said that was providentiality. So it had a pro video. I had seen it before. It was like my wife had asked me about what I thought about providence. Really weird question, but basically saying that these models, I thought they were just providence.
Yeah.
They were pro video. They only saw things with what they've already seen. They were all knowing, but only because they'd seen what already was there, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way they attack it. And I remember when we spoke a couple of months ago that you gave me a thought experiment with a digital twin made physical.
Yeah.
That I think was really interesting. And maybe that also sheds some truth on this that we're talking about right now. I don't know if you would.
Can you refresh my memory?
Yeah, but you said that you had this people say data is unambiguous, so data never lies. Or something. Data is not. We just have this good data, and then you said, okay, but take that data and turn it physical, and then you suddenly have.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
This was the case of the crib camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should I describe?
Yeah, do it. But please,
Yeah.
I love that story.
So I think this is a case of what you might call data washing. And it very much relates to what you're talking about with bias. So this is a semi-anonymized anecdote. It could be many different companies, but there was a startup company that was doing baby monitoring in cribs. So they had a downward facing camera and any system like that. So the kinds of things it would monitor is respiration rate, side sleeping, movement within the crib. And so if you're going to release a product like that, you need to test it on a wide demographic. It so happened that it was developed in a rather affluent area, and with their best intentions, they reached out to a research hospital and got access to a number of parents with newborns, and they used that system. And rightfully so, they can brag that they had this deployment and field testing and testimonials from happy parents. But then so who's doing this? It's engineers, it's product managers. So then you can ask, what are the demographics of the babies that were in that crib? Now the conversation already gets contentious, right? Because you're talking about bias and fairness. And I think that to caricature, I think that the typical startup response would be, what do you want from us? We went to the people in that domain, pediatric hospitals, and we got real data. Like, what do you want from us? Well, the thought experiment that I described was, so empirically, you look at the studies and you can get the data. You can look at the income level of the parents, the cleanliness of the air in the neighborhoods, the kind of cages, the kind of cribs that the babies are in, and so forth. And you'll get your statistics, and it might be somewhat troubling because it turns out it's not a very representative slice of society. Same goes for the size of the babies, the typical range of respiration rate. So the thought experiment is, suppose instead you build an animatronic baby. So now you've got a small robot, and it's there's a whole bunch of specs that you have to come up with. You want it to be as realistic as possible. And those specs involve the respiration rate, the skin tone, the skin elasticity, the body shape, all those kinds of, what is the baby wearing and stuff like that. The Wi-Fi bandwidth of the home. If you push those questions onto a team of engineers, they say, what the hell? Why are we in charge of picking all that? You have to dial all that into a simulator? Well, again, it's just a thought experiment, but that's the whole point, is that you need to think about all those things, but it's so much more convenient to do what I was calling data washing. You just get volunteers, and whatever that bias is, well, that's not really your problem because you're just a tech startup.
So what you're saying is you're making the baby in the thought experiment physical and saying, is this all the babies in the world?
Yeah.
Basically, right?
Yeah, you program it, you make the decisions and defend them. And I don't think anybody does that. That perhaps they'll do it in simulation, like with, what would you call it? With various game engine type simulators. But if you really want to test these systems for real, you need physical manifestations. In this case, an animatronic.
But this is also, to some extent, they could also argue back. I would argue back to that, saying that but we've also sort of allowed that in psychiatry, right? That's also based primarily on, I think, northeastern American.
Forever it's been
students,
a problem,
right? Yeah,
but it so happens that
does that work in Africa and China?
It's the AI researchers that are now making claims. I mean, the stereotype for this was a tradition of cancer-related research papers that were involved studies that were done in mice, but the titles of the papers didn't end with "in mice," right? So it's whatever finding, and then you have to read the abstract or more to find out that it was in mice.
In mice only, yeah.
Right. So that's something where you need the community to police itself.
Baby monitoring in white affluent kids.
Right. So that title isn't quite as compelling.
No.
You know?
Is your baby white, affluent, and healthy? Then we have a baby monitor for you. I'd love that ad.
Yeah. I think the U.S. is headed in that way.
I think that was I just love that experiment and that because it says a lot about the data and also the AI models that we're building. What data are they built on? Who wrote the first chapters of the big internet book that they were trained on? Well, the West did, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's something we need to also be very aware of when we're just rolling this out, that the hegemony maybe of the European, actually still the European or European, you know, Anglo-Saxon European cultural heritage dominance is still being reproduced in all of these biases everywhere because we're still building on the same knowledge.
The medium libraries. Is the message.
Yeah,
as they say.
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
that's it. So, do you believe AI will be the code of the future?
The code at an abstract level or computer programming?
Computer programming code and you know, and in that vein, that the agents will be running an increasingly digital world as the extension of this.
I guess I'm going to rephrase it into a different question. Will we still have software engineers?
Yeah.
Will they still need to get degrees in computer science? Will they have to study the discipline of software engineering?
And now I'm just saying that we have a bias here in that Serge is actually teaching these people.
Yeah. I think...
interviewer's note.
Yes. So I think this is another thing where people will be able to answer it for themselves. I alluded earlier to these things that involve critical public infrastructure, like public transit systems. And the more you know about the way LLMs code, the less you would want it used in systems like that. It's just too dangerous. There's too much confabulation. But then you might think, well, there's stuff like coding up a website or a payment system or something, like no code systems for doing that. My main feedback there is, be my guest. Give it a shot. From my perspective, I would not trust these things with my grocery list, much less with a website. But be my guest. Nothing I say could even nudge the narrative that's going on.
But aren't you also now becoming a boomer than us? Because every developer in the whole wide world, I think it is the most publicized also and discussed, adoption, and that's where it's adopted for something productive.
They're using it, but they still need to know what they're doing.
Yeah. So are we getting rid of all the junior coders? Are they getting worse? And then will we have these senior developers in the future that will know what's going on if everyone has just been using AI? So everyone right now using AI to get into coding, right? Or programming.
Yeah.
And then in 10 years, when all of the old ones who used to do COBOL and all that, they all left the market, will we know what good code is?
I mean, this is beyond boomer. I'm not sure what you call, I guess, the great generation or whatever.
I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying the boomer is becoming, analytical concept.
But there were punch cards that went into the age of Fortran. And with Fortran, you still had to write down your programs first. Yeah. And when that generation saw the generation of C programmers not have to do that and have things like debuggers, they would say, wow, look at what our generation lost. We used to go to a whiteboard and we would draw flowcharts and we would think carefully about what we're executing. Or people who did assembly programming on those old HP calculators and fit integration into 4K or, So this kind of thing persists. And right now, the idea of prompt engineering is still a Wild West thing. But make no mistake, it is a kind of programming. And it is as foreign to the previous generations as things like Python would be to people who coded in Fortran.
Yeah.
So these levels of abstraction keep changing, and you can't get advances like deep learning without people who code very close to metal. I mean, that if you want things like CUDA and GPU programming, as long as you're still using the old paradigms, then you can keep building AI frameworks on top of them. But these AI frameworks need massive amounts of data. You can't get Copilot without massive amounts of data from GitHub. So all those generations of programmers who obediently put their code on GitHub, they didn't know at the time that it would be used to train these coding assistant bots. But it's only for the programming languages that are dominant at this time.
What about the future programming? Will we have future programming languages?
Yes, I don't know exactly what they'll look like, but I think the main thing is...
But if AI can't support them because they don't have scale, this is actually a very interesting question.
Right. As you said, I have a bias because I work in a computer science department. I'm not saying I know what the programming languages will look like, although quantum computing is developing fast. So there's certainly going to be things in that space that for which there's no training data available today.
But my point is, people will use the coding languages that ChatGPT can help me with, or Copilot can help me with, and if they only can help me with those that were predominant yesteryear, will I ever use a new coding language?
Well, I mean, it depends. Again, you have to look at market segmentation. So there can be things like business accounting where it could be that you never need another programming language ever.
Yeah.
But if you're doing things like
quantum computing,
pharmaceutical drug discovery or something, it could be that you need entirely new programming languages. So I just know...
But that's going to be really difficult when everyone is working with LLMs to code in general.
Yes and no, because the same, these systems are enormously helpful as tutors. And like you can learn, the more of a body of work that exists around very popular topics, the more, just like with Wikipedia, the more... And I'm kind of restricting myself to uncontroversial topics, not politics and so on, but Haskell, C++, whatever. It is remarkably, it's remarkable how useful LLMs are for these things in a tutorial format.
But my point is just, but you invent the rattlesnake tomorrow. It's called that instead of Python. You invent a new coding language.
Yeah.
And no one has ever used that in the past. So no AI is trained on it. No AI knows anything about it. Then most developers using Copilot, which is 99% of the world right now, will, or maybe not, but a lot, will not use your coding language.
Yeah, I think there'd just be the usual push and pull of supply and demand. And at some point, if there's a new generation of devices and processors that need that, the pendulum swings in a way where people really need to build up that trove of reference data.
I've also said previously, I've actually asked a question that maybe in the future we will need, because when we've previously had these spurts of innovation like Industrial Revolution and we invent the priest class, or we emphasize them. Today what happened when we were no longer farmers anymore? We went to school instead. So we just got more and more schools because now we needed to monitor complex systems instead, and that required even more expertise. Are we going to have more schools? If we take it as a certain that junior developers will be automated with AI in the future, and only will you need to teach people for 5 more years to become senior developers out of the box, so they can actually review very complex code. Do you get my point?
So I think that we're still, that type of vision undervalues the intangible roles that people play in any real world job. And if we're sticking with historical analogies, the term I would use here is a sin eater. You know that term? It's a medieval term.
Yeah, I've heard it before. I can't place it right now.
So a sin eater would be someone in the age of indulgences where you could have sins. I mean, the way the story goes is that at the funeral of someone from the nobility, that person has
Yes. Now I know it.
sins in
Yes.
their life.
Yes.
And you could hire a person who would have a symbolic meal at the funeral,
That's
and
right.
that would represent the sins. And so that person ate the sins. So I know that's sort of absurd or outrageous as a comparison, but
I love it.
But
I really
think,
love it.
like, if you go back to the example, let's apply it to the case of spreadsheets. Those mom and pop businesses or SMEs in the 70s that were critically dependent on very moody programmers to manage all their finances. It was such a celebratory experience they had when they found out spreadsheets could do it. They didn't need to code. Everyone could do it, and none of these annoying programmers anymore. And so you had CEOs saying, I can do my accounting with one hand tied behind my back. Like, I don't need these programmers anymore. But then it turns out that's a job. And if they do it as a side hustle on top of running the business, there's going to be some mistakes in that spreadsheet. So you need someone who is, in that case, a spreadsheet jockey. That they just, even if you regard it as easy, because you remember what it was like before,
who understands.
they just need to own it. So what does it mean to own it? It means that you can explain when things go wrong, and most critically, you are accountable.
Yeah.
So that is as old as time.
I always say, and I've said it multiple times also in previous episodes, that God made the world, but Adam had to name everything, right?
Yeah.
He had to say what's the name of things, because God couldn't tell him what the value was of things to him. That's on you, Adam.
Yeah.
Is this valuable?
Yeah.
Right. And it's the same thing, sort of the same thing. But I think the Sin Eater sounds way cooler. I want to, just before we get to the final question, because I think we've had a long conversation. I think it's been a brilliant conversation. I also, you're very deep in political discussions on AI right now, because you also on the board of Ellis and doing a lot of these conferences also in Europe. What are your key priorities for democratic societies around the world when it comes to AI right now? Should they be AI focused, or what should?
So I think when I hear AI, I think statistics and software. So if you imagine taking any press release and search and replacing AI for statistics and software, you'd realize that's how I see the world. So this is kind of an absurd conversation that's going on, right? Yeah. However, AI is here for good, and I don't like situations where people are working for AI. I want AI to work for people. In order for that to work, you need strong democratic infrastructure. And not everywhere in the world has that, which means there's no single system that's going to work. If you have companies like OpenAI that are like state level actors, you may get the impression that they could have that kind of power and influence to actually put the cart before the horse and say, this is how a democratic or undemocratic society should run. I find that appalling. I see these things as statistics and software. They're tools. And the institutions of a functioning democracy should come first. So all of the ideas I have, particularly in the Nordics, but more broadly within Europe, is to put AI for work within those democratic structures.
The democratic normatives for the tools.
That's right. And that means step 0 is to regard the AI as ordinary technology. As long as you're feeling that idiot wind that's blowing through constantly that's telling you, no, this thing is conscious. It's like you can just put your whole government into a black box and you just type in legal questions and the computer says no.
Who was it that had a AI minister? There was a country, right?
Albania.
Yeah. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like straight out of a Netflix limited series. It's, of course it happened. It's probably well-intentioned. It's hopelessly naive.
Yeah.
It's the kind of people that read the first half of a bunch of science fiction books and didn't read the endings.
But also back to my point that, you can never say, I don't want to name the animals. You have to. It is the first job. of humans. Say, and if you put an AI if you tell the animals to name the animals, they will all be, if it's a dog, it'll all be dogs. They'll be barks, right?
Yeah.
So you need to have someone who can say what's valuable here. What do we want to do with this?
Yeah.
And maybe that's the discussion I think the problem is that a lot of countries are missing out on digital infrastructure as critical infrastructure, missing out on that point. And digital ministries are often, very low ranking in many countries if they even exist. And I think maybe we should start working on that.
Yeah. I think that these days tech solutionism is unambiguously a bad word. There was a time in the early days of Silicon Valley where it seemed like tech could fix a lot of things.
Yeah.
But that Albania AI a cabinet minister, that looks like hopelessly naive tech solutionism because they made claims that it will eliminate corruption. And all you need to do is see actual Albanians commenting on this on social media saying, I think you underestimate the ability of certain corrupt individuals.
I wish, I want to bring up the Claudius experiment from Anthropic as well, where they had it run snack shop. And I think Albania should maybe read that, how well it did. Did you read it?
No,
but it ended up, it was supposed to sell snacks, Cokes and chips. Yeah. But then someone asked it, can I buy a tungsten cube from you?
Right.
And they was like, hey, that's a good idea. So it bought a lot of metal cubes for all this money. And then suddenly it was a metallurgy shop and a snack shop. I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And Anthropic employees got discounts, even though they were 99% of its customer base.
Oh, that's
and it's
funny.
like, it's you should read it. It's perfect. You love that study.
Yeah.
But Serge, this has been an absolutely brilliant conversation. I've been really, really happy to have you here. I think it's been deep, it's been broad, it's been honest, it's been exploratory, all that. I really love it. And I also think I've thrown you some questions where you were like, how do I want to answer this? So I'm really happy that you've been here with me. And I have one final question for you, which I know you've been preparing for or waiting for. So are you ready for it?
Sure.
So Serge, what is the only constant?
The only constant is grifting. It's just been occurring to me throughout this conversation. I think there are many answers to that are more optimistic or anodyne, like change. That's the classic example. But I think we always need to remind ourselves that when new technology comes out, the con men line up. And it's same shit, different DJ. It's something that plays out through all of history, and you have to be on your toes at all times. When you've got fear of missing out, when you're out of work and scrolling LinkedIn and feeling fear, that is where the grifters strike. And we just can never forget it. There's no way to tech solutionize ourselves out of it. The grifters are always there. That's
a great, but also a little
sobering.
Sobering.
Yeah.
Final note here.
Yeah.
You sort of bringing back the idiot wind to the conversation, where I just thought we'd landed on this as a genius wind this episode.
There's a fight between good and evil, and I'm trying to be on the good side.
I think in many ways, what we need more of is conversations that sort of try to unravel a little bit of this, because it's everywhere, as you said. AI, this, that.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that you took the time to have this conversation with me today.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, share it with a friend or a colleague.